Okay, so in this short video, we're going to have a look at the 5 most important things you should be doing if you want to move up from a C to an A. You, of course, need to do all of these things if you're looking to push up from an A to an A star, and actually, you don't even need to do the A star tips to get to an A star. If you do all of these 5 things really well, you can get an A star doing so as well. So, all of the below tips were covered in other videos on this course, so make sure to have a look at them beforehand for lots more examples in detail. But this is just to kind of help you keep in mind 5 things you should work on and make sure to get right in every single essay in order to improve your grades. And you need to be confident and practicing all of these before thinking about how to push up to an A star or the real top marks. So, first key point is to plan before you write and be clear what your structure and points are. So, before writing your essay, it's imperative that you plan. This will ensure that you have a structured answer to the question that covers a range of key points and will allow you to come to an effective and backed up overall judgment. So before you start writing, you should know what's going to be covered in every paragraph, the main points for and against in every paragraph, and your overall judgment will be in your introduction, mini conclusions, and conclusion. So planning for 5 minutes like this before you start writing will make sure that you stay on track, focus on the question, that your judgment is consistent throughout the essay. Which I've said a number of times throughout the course now, you don't want your overall judgment to be a surprise to the examiner by the time they get to your conclusion. The second key tip is to have a clear structure with well matched up for and against arguments in each paragraph and a mini conclusion. So you should make sure that every single 30-mark essay you write has the same clear structure that allows you to cover a range of points and pick up as many AO1, AO2 and AO3 marks as possible. So it should be as follows. You should have an introduction, which sets out your paragraphs or points and directly answers the question, so introduces your judgment. 3 main paragraphs with a for argument, an against argument, doesn't really matter the order of those, and a mini conclusion. So you should make sure that the for and against arguments are well matched up to create an effective debate within the paragraphs. You should make sure that the for and against arguments are clear points in relation to the question. And you can use kind of really simple language and the language of the question to do that. So one key argument that deviation has been a success is da, da, da. And if you use that kind of language, it will force you to kind of say the specific point. It will make sure that it's a really relevant point in relation to the question. You should also make sure that you have a clear section at the end of your paragraph with a mini conclusion. And this will make sure that you pick up enough AO3 marks throughout the essay. And that's really important. As evaluation, AO3 marks are often the marks that students do the worst at in the exam. And then finally, you should have a conclusion that directly answers the question and justifies your judgment. It is possible to do really well with 2 paragraphs, main paragraphs, rather than 3. So 2 paragraphs for argument, against argument, mini conclusion, 2 of those rather than 3. We really do recommend doing 3 because it allows you to cover a wider range of points. But if you do 2 of those with an introduction and a conclusion, and you just find that you're just not able to write enough in the time to do 3, you can still do really, really well doing 2. Third point is to directly answer the question and justify your answer. So to do well in evaluation, you should directly and clearly answer your question and then make sure to justify it. And this should be in your introduction, your mini conclusions, and in your overall conclusion. And one of the best ways to do that is by explaining the most important reason why you've come to this judgment. So you should really argue what you think rather than just picking a side, and it'll ensure that you're able to justify it. So clearly state your answer, your judgment, and at the end of the introduction, your mini conclusions in your main paragraph, and then justify it with the most important reason why. And that will force you to explain and really justify it and help you to pick up those really important evaluation marks. The fourth key point is to improve your analysis by explaining before and after examples. So in order to make sure you're picking up enough marks through analysis, you should not just kind of explain, analyze, and then introduce an example and then go on to the point on the other side. After your example, you need to kind of link it back to the point. So you should first introduce and explain your point. Don't try to use fancy language, just simply introduce it. Then you want to kind of really explain it, explain that point, how it's important. Then you bring in a relevant example that supports the point, but then you don't stop there. What you do is you analyze this example and demonstrate how it supports your point. And using kind of language like this shows, this demonstrates, is really, really important. So you're introducing an example and then saying, this shows how deviation has been a success because, and linking it back and analyzing it and linking it back to the point that you've selected the example to support. And the fifth and final key point is to practice your timings. So knowing how long you have to write your essay and practicing in time conditions is crucial to preparing yourself effectively for your final exam. The students who see the biggest improvements are those who practice essay writing regularly throughout the A level, so that by the time they're writing their most important essays in the final exam, they've written kind of over 30, 40, 50 by that point. So you should practice loads of essays in time conditions, and you should know exactly how much time you need to spend on planning your introduction, your main paragraphs, and conclusion. Because ultimately, you can be as prepared as you want. If you spend kind of way too long on one question because you haven't practiced your timings and only have 20, 25 minutes for your next essay question, you'll drop a lot of marks and kind of do much worse than you potentially could have if you practice your timings well.